Okay, let's look at using a cookie. So I'm going to create another new scene now. So I'm going to save the existing scene. I'm going to call it scene 1. Okay, and I'm going to again add a plane, create plane. I'm going to position the plane at 0. X is 0, Y is 1, Z is 0. Rotation of 270 degrees on the x-axis. Okay, and I'm now going to add a spotlight to the main camera. I'm going to go to the main camera. Let me just twist this around. Okay, let me just a bit. Now I'm going to add a spotlight to the main camera. So I'm going to say add component. Okay, rendering light. I'm going to change it to spot. I'm going to set the range to 18. I'm going to set the spot angle to 40. And I'm going to change the intensity to 3. Okay. So we've got a spotlight that's directly projected onto the plane from the camera itself. Okay, the spotlight is actually in the camera. Now I'm going to use a texture that is already available for me in the project folder for this particular lab. So there should be something called hour 6 and something that says biohazard. So I'm going to drag this texture into my assets pane in my project view. Okay, so once I've done that, I will highlight the texture that I've just dragged in called biohazard. Okay, and the details of it will appear in inspector view. So now I'm going to change the settings for this particular texture, because depending on whether I'm going to apply this texture to a point light or spotlight or a directional light, it has got to have certain properties set for it. So I'm going to initially set the properties for a spotlight. So I'm going to go to the texture type. I'm going to change this to advanced. Okay, from the drop down options box, I'm going to change this to advanced. I'm going to click on alpha from grayscale. Okay, and then I'm going to click on in the generate mid-maps, make sure it's checked. Then I'm going to click on, I'm going to check the border mid-maps checkbox. And then finally, I'm going to change the red mode to clamp. Okay, so make sure you've got all these values set properly for all the different fields. Advanced texture type, advanced, generate cube map 9, import type default, alpha from grays is checked, generate mid-maps is checked, border mid-maps is checked, the red mode is clamped. Then when you're done, click on apply. Okay, then go back to your main camera, click on your main camera. Now if you look down your main camera, you will see that there is a particular field there that says cookie, which is currently empty now, with a kind of empty text field there that says none. And drag the biohazard from the assets pane in the project view into this text field box. So now the biohazard texture is now applied to the cookie. So now if we take a look at the, you can see now that this biohazard, this image, this texture image is now projected onto the plane. Okay, so the projection is along with the cone of the spotlight. So let's see what happens when we drag the plane forward and backwards. So let's click on the plane first. Let's go to the plane. I'm going to kind of switch to the X point. So now if I move the plane backwards, you can see, okay, how the image fades away. If I drag it forward, you can see how it becomes clearer. Okay, so I can drag the image back and forth, for example. If I were to put a object between the camera and the plane, you will see that the image is actually projected. You see the image kind of, you will see the cube. Let's say I'm going to put a cube into this scene. You see the cube, the image being projected onto the cube as well as onto the plane, and you have the effect that the light's actually being projected across onto the cube and onto the plane. Okay, so let me add in a cube now, or you can put any other object of your choice. Let's put a cube here into the scene. And let me just drag this cube forward a bit. Okay, let me switch back. So let me switch to Y. Okay, so we've got the cube here. Okay, so you can see now. Let me move this forward a bit now. So you can see now as I drag the cube on the on this particular axis, the x-axis, back and forth, and you can see how it appears as the image from the spotlight also impacts onto the cube. Okay, you can see this in the game view. If you go back again to the main camera, we can change the values of the range, and then of course it will change accordingly as well. So if I provide the value of 1 for the range, then obviously the spotlight doesn't hit the plane, and so the texture that is our cookie also does not hit the plane. So if I change the range to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, to 6, okay, see what happens now as I change 7, 8. Okay, now why are we having that thing kind of appearing on the cube? Because now you see what's happening is that the range of the spotlight is not far enough to hit the plane, but it's actually hitting the cube. So you only see one part of the image of the texture being displayed as it is projected onto the surface of the cube. Okay, if I move the cube out of the way, then basically we'll see whether it actually can reach its, you will actually see it's totally black because it hasn't reached the plane yet. So if I click on the cube and I move the cube out of the way, or I can in fact move it closer or move it up and down. So if I move the cube out of the way, it hasn't reached the screen, so I click back on here. So as I increase the range, okay, the cone of the spotlight gets closer and closer to the plane until it actually hits the plane. So if I increase this to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, okay, 10, 11, okay, sorry, this is too high, 11, 12, okay, 13, 14, okay, so by the time you reach, by the time you reach 14, it's onto the screen. I can change again, as we saw, can change the spot angle, and if I change the spot angle, you see that the size of the image being projected corresponding to the texture also increases. I can change the spot angle, for example. The color, we have seen before, you can change the color as well if you want. Intensity, you can also change the intensity. You see how it changes correspondingly in the scene view. Okay, now let me just bring this spot angle back to a more smaller size. I'll make the intensity more or less the same. Okay, now let me go back to the X view now, and let me click on the plane. So now we look at the plane. Let's rotate the plane. So now I'm going to rotate the plane, okay, to the left. So as you see, as I rotate the plane, okay, the image shown in the game view pretty much stays the same, but you can see that the image warps a bit in the scene view. Can you see? In the scene view, as I rotate the plane that the image of the texture is being projected on from the cookie, it warps a bit, okay, but it stays the same in the game view. Okay, so that is for the case of a projection of the image from a cookie from a texture for a point light. So as I mentioned earlier, for different types of lights, you're going to have different types of settings for the texture that you're going to use as the cookie for that specific light. So if I go back again to my texture, I'm now going to change the settings for this texture to fit the case where I'm going to work with a point light source. So the point light source is actually going to radiate out in all directions. So because it's going to radiate out in all directions, we can't have a single image. What we want to have is actually an image that kind of wraps around when it is mapped out in all directions. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to change. We're going to go to generate cube map, and we're going to say full cube map, okay, And then we are going to go down to import types to default, alpha from gray, border mid maps, generate mid maps, border mid maps, wrap mode is still clamp, filter mode is bilinear, and click on apply. Okay, so if I click on my biohazard now, if you look at the preview window right down at the bottom, you can see this is how the general structure of the texture looks like now, and it actually corresponds to like a sphere that's enwrapping a point light. So depending on where you are from the point light, and you have whether you have some kind of plane that's near that point light, you're going to see a particular version of that image. Okay, so now that we have done that, we go back to the main camera and we change this to a point light. Now that we changed it back to a point light, we notice that the cookie field is now empty. So we repeat what we did previously. We will drag the biohazard texture from the assets pane of the project view all the way into the texture field for the cookie in a light component in the inspector view for the main camera. Let go, and there you go. You've got a an example now of projection of coming from a point source. Okay, so let's go back to the plane, or let's go back to the cube. Okay, so let me get this a bit closer. I'm just going to rotate this around a bit, so this is a bit more clearer. Rotate this around. Okay, I'm now going to just kind of select the cube and move it around. So as I move the cube around, you can see that actually the image is being projected all around from the camera. So the image is not only just projected onto the plane. So if on the plane directly in front of the camera, it's actually projected in 360 degrees in a kind of a spherical direction in all directions from the point light source that's in the camera at the moment. Okay, so if I move the cube around the camera, okay, right now of course it can't be seen, but you can see that even at this point, if you look at the game view, you can see some part of the image that's actually being projected onto the cube. Okay, now you see the cube is on the right hand side of the camera. Now let's go to the, let's get in a bit closer. Let's go to the main plane itself. So if you look at the main plane, we drag it to the left, you can see how the image is appearing. You can drag it up and down, for example. Okay. If you keep dragging it further, then you don't see it anymore. Of course, you don't see it anymore because remember the light's emanating in a 360 degrees direction. So you only see it if you kind of wrap this plane, if you kind of somehow move this plane around to the other side. So if I did something like if I moved it up to here and I rotated the plane around, if I rotate this plane around, you can see as I rotate this plane around, the image appears on the other side. Can you see that? The image is appearing on the other side. Now if I drag this thing a bit to down on the x-axis, you can see now the image is appearing. So the image is emanating in 360 degrees from the point light source at which this texture is being applied as a cookie. Okay, let me drag it back to its original position again. Okay, let me drag it back to its original position. We'll rotate the plane back to its original orientation. Okay, I'm going to drag it back. Drag it back a bit. Okay, so that's for the case of a point light. The last one we're going to look at is to modify the texture to work with the directional light. So with the directional light, I go to the texture type, it's advanced. I don't have a cube map, so I say none for generate cube map. The other settings are the same. Generate alpha from grays is still checked. Generate mid maps is checked. Border mid maps is checked. But now the wrap mode, I've set it to repeat. And that is because, remember, the directional light is coming in from all, is filling up the entire scene. So that means what you want is for this image to be repeated throughout the entire scene and not just only at one particular point where the camera is located at. So we set this to wrap mode, we click apply, Okay. Then we go back again to the main camera. We change the type of the light component in the inspector view to directional. We go to the texture in the assets pane of the project view, drag it back in and put it in as a cookie, and there you have it. Okay, so now if we zoom in a bit, now we go back to the plane. We go back in a bit closer. Let me just pan in a bit closer. You can see this a bit more clearly. Okay. Okay, so now if we look carefully, the image is projected onto the plane, just like in the case of the spotlight, but the image is actually repeated. So now if I drag the plane around, if I click on the plane, translation icon, if I kind of drag it around, you can see that the image is actually projected in all directions. It's repeated as I said, because remember the directional light source is basically emanating in parallel lines across the entire scene. Okay, so we have now seen the application of a texture as a cookie for 3 different types of light: point light, spotlights, and directional lights. Now let's go continue. The next thing we're going to look at is cameras. Okay, cameras are basically the player's view into the world. We have already seen that by default, all new scenes will have at least one camera, which is the main camera, but you can introduce as many cameras as you want. And the cameras, basically, whatever they project and display will be seen in the game view. So the cameras can, if you introduce multiple cameras into a scene, you can provide different perspectives and control how different objects appear in different parts of the scene. Cameras also have layers. The 2 main layers are the GUI layer, which allows the camera to look at GUI elements. We look at GUI elements later on. And the flare layer, which allows the camera to see the lens flares of lights. And we saw in a previous step that lens flares are a kind of special effect that you apply to light sources. And the audio listener allows the camera to pick up sound. So in a 3D environment, the sound is not uniform across the scene. If you are close to a sound source, the sound will sound louder. And of course, if you are very far away, you may not be able to hear the sound. In order for the audio listener to work, you can only have one audio listener attached with a specific camera in a scene. So you have multiple cameras in a scene. You need to remove or you need to disable the audio listeners of all the cameras except one single camera. There should only be one audio listener per scene. So we look at this concept later on when we start talking about audio and introducing audio into our environment. Now let's look at cameras in Unity. So I want to create, first thing is just to note, if I want to create an additional camera, all I do is just say click create, and then in the hierarchy view, say click create, then click camera, and now I have a second camera appearing in the scene. Now, you notice that when I create a camera, okay, a new camera, it is the view from the main camera that's actually displayed in the game view. Okay, so for example, you see if I move this new camera to the top, or I move it to the left, okay, that's actually what's displayed in the game view. So right now, okay, what is shown in the game preview, what is shown in the camera preview here, okay, what is shown in the camera preview here is actually the view from this current camera, and this current camera is also the camera that's displaying onto the game view. So basically, whatever I'm doing with this camera here, okay, the view that's displayed in the camera preview and the game view are identical. Okay, that's because it's the view from this camera that's actually been displayed. Okay, however, if I click back on the main camera, okay, now in the main camera, this is how the main camera looks like right now. So now when I highlight the main camera, the camera preview actually shows the view from the main camera, but the game view is actually showing the view from the second camera that I just introduced in the hierarchy view. So if I drag the drag the main camera around, okay, if I drag the main camera around, you see that the camera preview will change to reflect the movement of this main camera. Okay. But the view of the game view still shows the view of the second camera that introduced into the hierarchy view. Okay, so the thing that distinguishes which camera is being displayed is the depth field of that specific camera. If you look at the main camera at the moment, now currently what we have got highlighted is the main camera. If you look at the inspector view for the main camera, there's a particular field called depth, and this field is -1. So this means that this main camera is kind of, you can think of it is on a kind of a grid or an axis at location -1. And if I click on the second camera that I introduced in, you look at the depth field. The depth field is currently 0. So what it means is that the camera, the newly introduced camera, okay, is somehow in front of the main camera. Main camera depth is -1. The camera, the depth is 0. So the main camera, the camera at depth 0 is placed in front of the main camera because the value of its depth field is higher than the value for the main camera. So therefore, what appears on the game view is the display from the camera. Okay, so if I, again, as I said, if I move the camera around, okay, then whatever happens in the game, whatever is shown in the camera preview is also shown in the game view as well. Okay, because this camera is currently set, the value of its viewport rectangle, the viewport rectangle parameters x and y and w and h are both set so that this camera, the current newly introduced camera, is actually filling up the entire view of the game view. Okay, so you can think of the game view is like a projection screen that's dropped down, and the camera is kind of projecting on top of that. Okay, it's playing out the movie on top of that. So now with the values of x and y set to 0 and w and h set to 1 each, it's occupying the entire screen. Okay, let's now look at the concept of playing with multiple cameras. Normally, there's only one camera, okay, but if you have more than one camera, as we saw just now, one camera will draw over the other depending on which camera has the higher depth field. So the camera with the higher depth field, as we can think of it as being closer to the game view screen on which the image is being projected, the movie from the camera is being projected on. Okay. Now there's a viewport rectangle property that treats the screen of the game view as a simple rectangle. The upper left corner of the rectangle is 0, 0, and the lower right corner is 1, 1. And the coordinates are percentages of the size. So coordinate of 1 means 100% of the size, either the width or the height, and a coordinate of 0.5 means 50%. Okay, so let's work around with an example that involves multiple cameras in a scene and how they actually display in the game view. Okay, so I'm going to switch back again to Unity. I'm going to create a new scene now. So I'll save the current scene as scene 2. Okay, so now I am going to introduce some cubes into the scene. I'm going to create one cube. I'm going to duplicate the cube. So I'm going to rename this cube as cube 1. I'm going to rename this cube as cube 2. So we've got 2 cubes in the scene. So cube 1, I'm going to put the value as -2 for x, and then 1 for y, and -5 for z. Okay, that's cube 1. And then cube 2, I'm going to put the values 2, 1, and 5 for x, y, and z respectively. 2, 1, and 5 for x, y, z respectively. Okay, I'm going to put in a directional light into the scene to light it up a bit. Okay, just drag this directional light up a bit. So directional light is just there to add some color to the scene. Now I'm going to move the main camera around. I'm going to highlight the main camera in the hierarchy view. So I'm going to move the main camera to -3, 1, and -8 for the X, Y, and Z position values respectively. So it's going to be -3, 1, and -8. Okay, for X, Y, Z. I'm going to rotate the camera on the Y-axis to 45 degrees. Okay, so this is what's appearing now. So now you have one camera which is appearing, and the value in the camera preview, the image or the scene shown in the camera preview is exactly identical to the game view. Okay, because you've only got one camera. Now I'm going to add a second camera. Now go to the hierarchy view, create camera. So let's rename the second camera, camera 2. So you've got two cameras now, the main camera and camera 2. For camera 2, I am now going to position it slightly differently. I'm going to put this at 3, 1, -8. So X is going to be 3, Y is going to be 1, Z is going to be -8. Okay. And I'm going to change the rotation to 3, 1, and -8. I'm going to change the rotation to 315 around the Y-axis. So X is 0, Y is 315. Okay. So now we notice, okay, that what's displayed in the camera preview and also in the game view is the image or the movie that's available or seen from camera 2. And that's, as we saw before, because the depth of camera 2 is 0, whereas the depth of the main camera now is currently -1. Okay, but always remember that when you select any particular camera, what is shown in the camera preview box at the bottom right hand corner of the screen is what is currently seen from the currently selected camera. So that may be different from what's actually appearing in the game view. Okay.